6 months after I calculated I had 4,000 days left, I hadn't changed a single thing. Not one. I'm serious. I did the math. I sat with it. I felt that cold weight in my chest that I think you're supposed to feel. And then I went back to work. Back to saying yes to the wrong people. Back to telling myself that the things that actually mattered to me would happen eventually. Someday, when things slowed down, when the kids were older, when the mortgage was paid off, when I finally felt ready. I'm 78 years old, and I need you to understand something. Someday is not a day of the week. It never was. It was just the word I used to avoid having the conversation with myself. The calculation I'm talking about, I did it at 52. A friend of mine, a guy named Robert, sat across from me at a diner in Columbus, Ohio, and he pushed a paper napkin toward me with some numbers on it. He'd done the math. He was 54 at the time, retired early, and he was obsessed with what he called the arithmetic of the obvious. He said, "Look, if you live to 80 and you're 52 now, you have roughly 10,000 days left." But then he started crossing things out. Sleep, gone. That's a third. Working years, obligations, gone. Recovery from illness, the slow years at the end when your body starts making its own decisions. He crossed those out too. And what was left on that napkin scared me more than anything a doctor had ever told me. About 4,000 days where I would actually be myself, where I could move, choose, create, love with intention. 4,000 days, if I was lucky. I folded that napkin and put it in my wallet. I carried it for 6 months. And I did absolutely nothing. That's the part nobody talks about. Everyone talks about the wake-up call, the revelation, the moment of clarity. Nobody tells you that you can have the clarity and still sleepwalk. Because the real problem was never that I didn't know time was passing. The real problem was that I had built a life so full of other people's emergencies that I had no room left for my own intentions. My calendar was a monument to everyone else's priorities, and I had mistaken being busy for being alive. My wife Karen would tell you the same thing. She watched me for years, 27 years at that point, and she used to say, "When are you actually going to be here?" Not physically. I was always physically present. She meant the other kind of present. The kind where you're not already half inside tomorrow's problem while you're sitting at the dinner table tonight. She wasn't asking me to be romantic. She was asking me to exist in the same room as her. That's how far gone I was. We had been living parallel lives under the same roof, politely, quietly, and I had called that a marriage. I had called that love, and I think for a long time she was lonelier married to me than she would have been alone. That one still costs me something when I say it out loud. So let me tell you what finally broke through. It wasn't the napkin. It wasn't Robert's numbers. What broke through was my mother. She was 81 when her memory started going. Not all at once. It never goes all at once. It goes in patches, like fog settling in certain corners of a room. She still knew my name. She still knew she loved me. But she couldn't always remember where she grew up, or her sister's face, or the name of the street she'd lived on for 40 years. And I realized, sitting with her one afternoon, watching her search for a word that had just been there a second ago, I realized that everything she knew, everything she'd lived through, every story I'd never thought to ask about, was disappearing, permanently. The library was closing, and I had spent decades thinking I could visit any time. I drove home that day, and I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes. And I thought about every conversation I had never started, Every Sunday I had promised myself I'd call. Every time she'd said, "Someday you should come see me," and I'd said, "Soon, Mum, soon." And I want to tell you, if you still have parents, grandparents, anyone older who carries things you haven't heard yet, that word soon is a debt that compounds. And there will be a day when the bank closes. I started recording her. Got a small voice recorder, sat with her twice a month, and I just asked her things. Where did you grow up? What was your mother like? What was the first time you were ever really scared? What did you want to be when you were young? Some days she remembered everything with this beautiful precision. Other days we sat in the fog together. But I have those recordings. My kids have listened to them. My grandchildren will listen to them. And the person who almost let that library close permanently without ever walking inside, that was me at 52. Because I was too busy. Because someday, after that is when I started actually changing things. Not dramatically, not all at once. That's the other lie they sell you. The complete transformation, the overnight reinvention. That's not how it works at 50, 60, 70. You don't reinvent, you reclaim. Small pieces, deliberately, consistently. I started with something I now call the Wednesday audit. Every Wednesday evening I would sit with a blank piece of paper, not a screen, paper, and I would write down how I had spent my time that week. Not how I'd planned to spend it, how I actually had. And the first time I did this, I stared at what I'd written and felt genuinely embarrassed. I had given 22 hours that week to things that produced nothing I valued. Television I wasn't even watching, just on in the background. Conversations I'd agreed to that I'd known going in would go nowhere. An hour and a half, I counted, scrolling through news on my phone every morning before I'd even gotten out of bed. 45 minutes to an hour every night doing the same thing before I could sleep. Absorbing catastrophe that had nothing to do with my life, letting someone else's chaos live rent-free in my nervous system. 2.5 hours a day, 17 hours a week, gone. There's a woman I know, a woman named Diane, 61 years old, sharp as anyone you'll ever meet, who told me last year that she had spent the past 3 years meaning to take a ceramics class. She'd looked it up 4 times. She'd even found a studio 12 minutes from her house, and every time she went to sign up, she'd get distracted. Her phone would pull her sideways, or she'd fall into an hour of reading about something she'd never heard of before, and then another thing, and then it was late. Diane is not lazy. Diane is not uncommitted. Diane is someone whose attention is being harvested by systems that were engineered by people much smarter than both of us to keep her scrolling. That's not a character flaw. It's a design feature working exactly as intended. The question is whether you're going to keep volunteering. I stopped watching cable news cold. That was 8 years ago. I read a physical newspaper 3 times a week. That's it. I got back 11 hours a week. 11 hours. I started swimming again in the lake near our house every morning from May through October, something I'd loved at 30 and given up for no reason I could actually name, other than that somewhere along the way I'd let the calendar fill up with more important things. What was more important? I genuinely cannot tell you. That's the part that haunts me. Here's what nobody tells you about getting older. The real clock, the one that actually matters, isn't counting down to your death. It's counting down to your capability. You probably already know someone, maybe a parent, maybe yourself on certain mornings, who can see the difference between being alive and being fully functional. There's a window. It's real. Your knees are already sending you messages. Your energy has a different ceiling than it did at 40. The version of you that can still hike, swim, lift your grandkids, travel without planning around your body, that version has a timeline, and it is shorter than the calendar. My friend Dennis didn't understand this until he was 68, and the window had already narrowed significantly. He had a list, he'd carried it for 15 years, of places he wanted to see, things he wanted to do. And when he finally had the time and the money, his body had started making other plans. Not catastrophically, he's fine. But the Kilimanjaro climb he'd kept on the list since 1994, gone. Not because he died, because he waited until the window had mostly closed. He went to Tanzania anyway, sat at the base and looked up and said it was still beautiful. I believe him. But you could hear what wasn't in those words too. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to tell you what I wish someone had said to me directly, without softening it, at 52. The functional years are not the same as the total years. Plan for the body you have now, not the one you hope to still have at 75. Because the cruelest form of someday isn't, I'll do it when I'm ready. It's, I'll do it when I retire. And then retirement arrives, and the body has already gotten there first. The other thing that changed was what I call the reverse calendar. Instead of looking at the year ahead and filling it with obligations, I started at the end. What do I want to have done by December? Who do I want to have spent time with? What do I want to have finished, built, said, experienced? And then I worked backward from those things and gave them actual dates. Not aspirations, dates. My brother Patrick and I had been in a low-grade estrangement for 6 years. Nothing dramatic, just that slow drift that happens when two busy people stop making the effort and start calling it just the way things are. I put a date on the calendar. I flew to see him. We spent 4 days together doing almost nothing, just fishing and eating badly and watching bad television and talking the way we used to before we both got so serious and so busy and so convinced we'd get around to it. That was 3 years ago. We talk every 2 weeks now. We didn't need a dramatic reconciliation. We just needed a date on a calendar. That's all it was. A date. Karen and I want to come back to Karen for a second, because the marriage thing is real, and I think if you're over 50 and you're honest with yourself, you know what I mean when I say coexisting. You're in the same house, you're kind to each other, you're not unhappy exactly, but you can't remember the last time you were genuinely, deeply present with each other. Not the logistics of the household present, actually present. We started taking one evening a week, Thursday, every Thursday, where neither of us was on a screen, no phones. We cooked together, which neither of us had done in years. We talked about things that weren't the house or the kids or the schedule. And I want to tell you it was awkward at first. We had to relearn each other a little. We'd both changed in ways the other hadn't fully noticed. That was uncomfortable. It was also one of the better decisions I have made in the last decade. You can go somewhere beautiful together, the two of you, but only if you actually start the journey. I think what I am really trying to say, and I've been going around it in different ways, is that I spent the better part of 52 years waiting to be ready, waiting for the right time, waiting for permission that was never going to arrive from anywhere outside of me. And the cost of that waiting, when I actually add it up, the trips not taken, the conversations not started, the mornings not spent in the lake, the Thursdays not protected, the recordings not made, that cost is not something I can undo. I can only tell you what it looks like from here. I can only tell you that 4,000 days goes fast, faster than you think and slower than regret. The things you keep calling someday, They are not waiting patiently for you on the other side of your obligations. They are shrinking right now, today, while you read one more article you won't remember tomorrow, while you stay in the meeting that should have been an email, while you scroll past your own life. They are getting smaller. You still have time. That is the truth. I mean that with no irony and no softness. If you are 50, 55, 60, you have time. But time is not the same thing as someday. Time is specific. Time is Tuesday morning. Time is this Thursday. Time is the phone call you've been meaning to make for 8 months to someone who won't be around forever, and neither will you. What would you record if you started today? Whose voice are you not preserving? What's still on your list that your body can still say yes to? I still have the napkin, Robert's napkin from the diner in Columbus. 4,000 days crossed down to something real. I keep it not to scare myself anymore. I'm past that. But to remember that the math was never the point. The math was just the door. What mattered was whether I walked through it. If this landed somewhere real for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave me a comment. Tell me what your someday is, the thing you've been putting off. I read every one. And if you want more of this, more honest conversations about the years that are actually left, subscribe. I'm not done talking.